For the slot seam sample, you will need 2 rectangles 4 inches wide by 7 inches long. You will also need 1 rectangle 2 inches wide by 7 inches long. 7 inches length is on the warp for all the rectangles. Make sure to block all the rectangles. When there is no obvious wrong side or right side of the fabric, indicate one of the side to be the wrong side. Take the 2 rectangles 4 inches wide by 7 inches long and place them right sides together, matching the edges. Take a ruler and mark 1 inch seam allowance on the fabric, matching the edges. You can also follow the guidelines on the sewing machine throat plate. Pin both the layers together either vertically or horizontally. Machine based on the seam line, leaving long thread tails. For machine basting, change the stitch length to the longest stitch length on your machine. Stitch from top to bottom on the marking line. Do not backstitch. Leave a long thread tail instead. Stitch as close as possible to the pin and then remove the pin. Do not backstitch. Raise the foot up and pull the fabric. Leave a long thread tail and trim the threads. This is how the basting stitch will look. Press the seam and then press the seam allowances open. Now, with the right side of the fabric facing up, draw half-inch lines on each side of the seam. The marking lines should be at equal distance from the center. With the wrong side of the fabric facing up, place the right side of the strip facing down on the seam allowance. Strip should be centered on the seam allowance and the raw edges should be lined up. Pin with a couple of pins through all the layers. Now flip over so that the right side of the fabric is facing up and pin through all the layers. Remove the pins that are on the wrong side. Before stitching, remember to change the stitch length back to 10 to 12 stitches per inch. Top stitch on each side of the seam through all the layers. Back stitch at both ends of each seam. After stitching this seam, pull the threads and continue stitching on the other side. Trim all the threads except the basting stitch thread tails. This is how the sample will look after stitching. Slowly pull out one of the basting thread as shown. Now pull out the other basting thread. After pulling the basting threads, you will be able to see the contrasting fabric strip underneath. After pressing, this is how it's going to look like from the wrong side. And this is how it will look from the right side.